The door to Lord Ashworth's drawing-room opened at 4:30 in the afternoon, and everything the family had built over 3 careful years began to die. I know this because I heard it from behind the wall. Not a proper wall, a servant's corridor, narrow and cold, where I had learned to stand so still that even the mice forgot I was there. I pressed my ear to the plaster and listened to my father greet the Duke of Blackmore, as though the man were the second coming, dressed in a dark coat. "Your Grace, what an extraordinary honour. My daughters have been so eager." "I'm not here for your daughters, Lord Ashworth." Silence. The kind that has weight. "I beg your pardon?" "You have another, a third. Rosalind." My name. My real, actual name spoken aloud in a room I hadn't been permitted to enter in 3 years. I stopped breathing. My father's voice came back, thin and stretched, the way it sounded when he was calculating. "I'm afraid I don't know what your Grace means. I have 2 daughters, Cecilia and Marguerite, both accomplished, both currently in the room, I imagine, smiling, presented like wares at auction." The Duke's voice was low, unhurried, and utterly without warmth. "I didn't ride 4 hours to inspect merchandise, Lord Ashworth. I came for Rosalind. Produce her, or I'll leave and you can explain to every family in London why the Duke of Blackmore walked out of your house before tea was served." I flattened both palms against the cold plaster. My heart was slamming so hard I was certain it would give me away. He knew my name. No one knew my name. Not anymore. I should explain how a woman disappears inside her own family. It isn't dramatic. There is no locked tower, no chains, no Gothic cruelty. At least, not the kind that leaves marks anyone would see. It is simply a matter of erasure. You stop being invited to dinner. Your place setting vanishes. Your name is dropped from correspondence. When visitors arrive, you are sent upstairs. When the season begins, your sisters are fitted for gowns, while you are handed a mending basket and told to make yourself useful. I was 18 when my father decided I was a liability. The reason was simple. I had refused Lord Pemberton's proposal. Pemberton was 53, gouty, and in possession of a gambling debt my father needed erased through strategic marriage. I said no. I said it clearly, in front of witnesses, at a dinner party, and I did not apologize. My father never forgave public embarrassment. Within a month, the household had been informed that I was unwell. A nervous condition, they said, requiring rest and seclusion. My bedroom was moved to the east wing, the one reserved for storage and aging servants. My books were taken. My correspondence was intercepted. I was 21 now, and I had not left the grounds of Ashworth Park in 3 years. I was not imprisoned. I was simply unmade. My sisters were taught to speak of the family as though it contained only 2 daughters. Visitors never saw me. The servants who remembered were the ones loyal enough, or frightened enough, to keep quiet. So, when a duke I had never met stood in my father's drawing room and spoke my name as though it were a fact the whole world knew, the ground beneath me shifted in a way I could not understand. How did he know? They brought me down 40 minutes later, and they did it badly. My stepmother, Lady Ashworth, because of course my real mother was dead, that was the first thing they took from me, came to my room with a dress I hadn't seen before. Pale green, not new. One of Cecilia's cast-offs, hastily taken in. "You will go downstairs," she said, laying it across the bed like a peace offering that fooled no one. You will be pleasant. You will not speak of your situation. You will smile, curtsy, and if he asks you anything, you will defer to your father. Why is he asking for me? That is not your concern. He used my name. How does he? Rosalind? Her voice could cut glass when she needed it to. You have been given an extraordinary opportunity to be useful to this family. I suggest you do not waste it the way you wasted the last one. She left. I put on the dress. It smelled like Cecilia's perfume, rosewater and something sharper beneath it, like ambition. The drawing room was on the ground floor, south-facing, the one my father used for occasions he wanted to control. When I entered, I catalogued the room in a single sweep. My father, standing near the mantelpiece with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid with barely concealed fury. My stepmother on the settee, spine like a rod, smile fixed. Cecilia and Marguerite near the window, both in their best afternoon dresses, both wearing expressions of polite devastation. They had been dismissed in favor of the family ghost, and they knew it. And the Duke. He stood near the far wall, half turned toward the bookshelves, as though he'd been examining titles while he waited. When I entered, he turned. I had expected old. I had expected Pemberton, some variation of sagging entitlement in an expensive coat. What I got was a man perhaps 30, tall, dark-haired, built with the kind of lean authority that comes from riding and discipline rather than leisure. Sharp jaw, sharp eyes, grey or possibly green in different light, and fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He did not smile. He did not bow. He simply looked at me as though confirming something he already knew. "Miss Rosalind Ashworth," he said, not a question. I curtsied, because the alternative was standing there with my mouth open. "Your Grace." "You look like her." The room went very still. My father's hands tightened behind his back. "I beg your pardon," I said. "Forgive me." He said it without particular apology. "That was not meant to be spoken aloud. Please, sit." He gestured to a chair as though this were his house and not my father's. The audacity of it was so complete that I obeyed before I'd decided to. "Your Grace," my father began, stepping forward. "Perhaps I might explain." "You have had 3 years to explain, Lord Ashworth, and you chose concealment instead. I'll hear from her directly." He sat across from me. The distance between our chairs was proper, 6 feet, easily. But the way he leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands loosely clasped, made the space feel like nothing at all. "When were you last in London, Miss Ashworth?" 3 years ago, the season of 1820. "And since then?" "I have been here." "By choice?" The question was a blade held out handle first. I could take it, or I could let it lie there. My father cleared his throat. "Rosalind has been recovering from—" I asked her. 3 words, and my father closed his mouth. I had never seen anyone do that to him. Not once in 21 years. I looked at the Duke of Blackmore and made the first real decision I had been permitted in 3 years. "No," I said. "Not by choice." What happened next was chaos dressed in politeness. My father attempted to regain control of the conversation. He spoke of my health, my temperament, my unsuitability for society. Each word a small, precise nail driven into the coffin of my reputation. Lady Ashworth supported him with murmured agreement and sympathetic glances that never reached her eyes. The Duke listened to all of it. Then he said, "I'd like to walk the grounds with Miss Ashworth, alone." "That is entirely improper." "Then send a maid to follow at 30 paces. "I don't care. But I will speak with her without your narration, Lord Ashworth, or I will leave this house and every door in London will learn why." It was not a threat. It was a fact, delivered with the calm of a man who understood that his name was worth more than my father's entire estate. The Duke of Blackmore was one of the 5 wealthiest men in England. His displeasure was not something my father could afford. A maid was summoned. We walked. The gardens at Ashworth Park were the one thing I had been allowed to keep, because no one else wanted them. The formal beds had gone to seed during my mother's illness, and my father saw no value in flowers that couldn't be leveraged. I had spent 3 years coaxing them back. Roses along the south wall, lavender in the borders, a kitchen garden that fed the household when my father forgot to pay the grocer. The Duke walked beside me in silence for nearly a full minute. The gravel crunched under his boots. The maid trailed behind us like a reluctant ghost. "You're wondering how I know your name," he said finally. "The thought had occurred to me, Your Grace. Your mother was Eleanor Vane before her marriage." I stopped walking. He continued 2 steps before turning back. "You knew my mother?" "No, but my mother did. They were close. Close enough that your mother wrote letters. Many of them. The last was sent a week before she died." Something cracked open inside my chest. I held very still and let it happen without showing it on my face. 3 years of practice. "My mother mentioned a daughter," he continued, watching me with those unreadable grey-green eyes. "Rosalind. She described you as the brightest, fiercest thing in her life. She asked my mother to look after you if anything happened." "Your mother never came?" "My mother died 6 months later. The letter was buried in her correspondence. I found it this winter while settling her estate." He paused. "Along with others. Your mother wrote about what your father was, what he would do to you without her protection. She was remarkably precise in her predictions." The garden blurred. I blinked hard and the world came back, sharper than before. "So you came here out of obligation," I said. "A promise your mother never had the chance to keep." "I came here because a woman I respected asked for help, and the person she was trying to protect has been locked in a house for 3 years by a man who treats his daughters like currency." He stopped walking and faced me. "That is not obligation, Miss Ashworth. That is the bare minimum of decency, and I am sorry it took this long." No one had apologized to me in 3 years, not once, not for any of it. I looked at the roses along the south wall, the ones I had brought back from near death, stem by stem, season by season, and I said, "What exactly are you proposing, Your Grace?" "At this moment, that you leave this house, that you come to London under my family's protection, that you have a season, a proper one, with your own name and your own choices." "And your terms?" Something shifted in his expression. The careful control flickered, and underneath it, I caught a flash of something raw. Not pity, not duty, but anger. Anger on my behalf, held on a very tight leash. "No terms," he said. No conditions. I am not your father, Miss Ashworth. I do not trade in people. I left Ashworth Park the following morning in the Duke's carriage. My father attempted to negotiate. He saw opportunity. A duke's interest in his forgotten daughter was, to his mind, a windfall he could broker. He proposed a formal courtship arrangement, a settlement, a contract. The duke declined all of it. "She is of age," he said in the front hall, with servants listening and my sisters watching from the staircase. "She requires no permission from you. If you attempt to interfere, I will ensure that every detail of her treatment in this house reaches the ears of people you are currently trying to impress. Do we understand each other?" My father understood. In the carriage, I sat across from the Duke's aunt, a formidable woman named Lady Blackwood, who served as chaperone and who communicated primarily through meaningful silences and the occasional, devastating aside. The Duke rode alongside on horseback. Through the window, I watched the gates of Ashworth Park shrink and disappear behind a turn in the road, and I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I felt the future become possible again. London was terrifying and extraordinary in equal measure. The Duke installed me in his townhouse under Lady Blackwood's supervision. Separate wing, entirely proper, above reproach. Within a week, I had a wardrobe. Within 2, I had invitations. Within 3, the whispers had begun. Who was Rosalind Ashworth? Where had she been? Why was the Duke of Blackmore, the most eligible, most reclusive, most fiercely private duke in England, suddenly championing an unknown woman from a minor noble family? I heard the theories at my first ball. Lady Brampton's, mid-May, a crush of 400 in a house built for 2. I wore a gown of deep blue silk that Lady Blackwood had chosen. "You have your mother's colouring. Don't waste it on pastels." And I entered the ballroom on her arm, while the Duke waited inside. He found me within 10 minutes. Not obviously. He was too careful for that. He simply appeared at the edge of my conversation with Lady Whitmore, offered a polite greeting, and then remained. Standing close enough that his presence redrew the borders of the interaction. Close enough that when I turned to include him, our eyes met and the ballroom noise dimmed to a murmur. "You're managing admirably," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "I've been out of practice. Society is louder than I remembered." "Society is performing. You are the only genuine person in this room." "Including yourself, Your Grace?" The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one, quickly killed, especially myself. But I was watching him now. Had been watching him since Ashworth Park. And I saw things he didn't mean to show me. The way his gaze swept the room in patterns, checking exits. The way his jaw tightened when someone laughed too loudly behind him. The way his hand, at his side, occasionally curled into a fist and then slowly released. The Duke of Blackmore was not cold. He was armored. And something had happened to him that made crowded rooms feel like battlefields. "You don't enjoy these events," I said. "No." "Then why come?" He looked at me then, fully, and I saw the armor crack. Just a fracture, a single line of honesty breaking through. "Because you're here," he said. "And I told you I would make certain no one erased you again." The music swelled. Someone called for the next set, and I stood in the middle of Lady Brampton's ballroom, with my heart hammering against my ribs, understanding for the first time that I was in very serious danger. Not from society, not from my father, but from the quiet, controlled, furious man who had ridden 4 hours to say my name in a room full of people who had forgotten it. 3 weeks into the season, my father made his move. I should have expected it. A man like Lord Ashworth does not lose a piece from his board without attempting to recapture it. The weapon he chose was not confrontation. It was rumour. It began in the drawing rooms, a whispered suggestion that the Duke's interest in me was not charitable, but compromising. That I had been kept at Ashworth Park not because of my father's cruelty, but because of a scandal, an indiscretion, a fall, a child perhaps. And the Duke was involved. That his sudden appearance was not rescue, but damage control. The rumour was elegant in its cruelty. It explained the Duke's behaviour, my seclusion, and my sudden reappearance in a single, poisonous narrative. And it spread through London's drawing rooms like fire through dry grass.
I learned of it from Lady Blackwood, who told me over breakfast with the calm precision of a general delivering field intelligence. "Your father has been busy," she said, buttering her toast. "Half of Mayfair believes my nephew ruined you and is now parading his guilt around ballrooms." The bread turned to chalk in my mouth. That's a lie. Obviously. But lies don't need to be true to work. They only need to be believed long enough to do damage. The Duke was less measured. I found him in the library that evening, standing at the window, a glass of something dark in his hand, untouched. When I entered, he didn't turn. "You've heard," I said. "I've heard." "What will you do?" He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then he set the glass down, carefully, precisely, as though the act of placing it on the table required all his concentration, because the alternative was throwing it through the window. "What I want to do," he said, "is ride to your father's house and dismantle him publicly, brick by brick, until there is nothing left of his reputation or his comfort." "And what will you actually do?" He finally turned. In the firelight, his face was half shadow, half golden warmth, and the expression on it made my breath catch. Not anger, not calculation, but something raw and barely contained. "Whatever you tell me to do," he said. "This is your life, Rosalind, your name. I won't fight your war without your orders." It was the first time he'd used my Christian name. It landed exactly the way the master prompt predicted. Like a thunderclap, like a door opening, like the world tilting 3 degrees and never tilting back. "Rosalind," I repeated. "Forgive me, Miss Ashworth, No." I took a step closer, then another. The fire crackled between the silence. "Say it again." His jaw worked. Something in his eyes, the armor, the control, the careful distance, strained against its rivets. "Rosalind." My name, in his voice. In the quiet of a London library, with rain beginning to tap against the windows, I should have stepped back. I should have remembered the rules, the propriety, the exact calibration of distance that kept us both safe. Instead, I said, "What is your name? Your real one, not your title." "Edmund." "Edmund." I tasted it. He watched me taste it, and I saw his hand, the one at his side, curl into a fist and slowly, deliberately release. "I want to fight my own war, but I would like you beside me when I do." He nodded once, just once, and then he walked past me toward the door, close enough that his sleeve brushed my arm, and the contact, that single inch of wool against bare skin, sent a shock through me so violent I had to press my hand against the bookshelf to steady myself. He paused in the doorway. Without turning, he said, "Tomorrow, your father will be at Lord Colton's dinner. We'll go together." The door closed behind him. The rain intensified, and I stood alone in the library, on fire from wrist to collarbone, understanding that whatever was happening between us could not be contained by rules or distance, or the careful fiction that this was only rescue. Lord Colton's dinner was a battlefield disguised as a dining room. 40 guests, long table, candlelight turning crystal to stars. My father was there. I saw him the moment we entered, seated near the centre, already smiling at someone with the easy charm that made people trust him. Lady Ashworth beside him, impeccable. When he saw me on the Duke's arm, his smile didn't falter. That was more frightening than if he'd scowled. The evening proceeded with agonizing civility. Courses arrived and departed. Conversation flowed around topics designed to display wit without revealing anything real. I sat 4 seats from my father and felt his attention like a blade pressed flat against my skin. Not cutting, not yet, but letting me know it was there. The detonation came between the fish course and the roast. Lady Pemberton, wife of the very Lord Pemberton I had refused 3 years ago, raised her voice just enough to carry. "Miss Ashworth, how delightful to see you in society again. We had all heard you were indisposed." The pause before the last word was a masterwork of insinuation. "Tell me, does your recovery owe itself entirely to His Grace's generosity?" Every fork at the table slowed. The room was listening now, pretending not to. This was it. The rumour given a public stage. My father had armed her. I was certain of it. One glance at his face confirmed. Carefully blank, watching, waiting to see if the trap would close. I set down my wineglass. I looked at Lady Pemberton with 3 years of silence and erasure coiled behind my teeth. "My recovery," I said, my voice carrying clearly, "owes itself to the fact that I survived being hidden by my own family for 3 years because I refused to marry your husband." The silence that fell was not the polite kind. It was the silence of 40 people collectively realizing they were witnessing something that would be discussed for the rest of the season. Lady Pemberton went scarlet. My father's mask cracked. A flash of fury quickly smothered. "Lord Pemberton proposed when I was 18, I continued, because I had started and there was no going back, and I discovered I didn't want to go back. He was 53. He was in debt. My father needed the alliance. I said no. And for that, I was removed from society, moved to a storage wing, and told I did not exist. If anyone at this table has heard rumors about why I disappeared, now you have the truth. Make of it what you will." The room erupted, not in noise, but in motion. Glances exchanged like currency, hands raised to lips. The social calculus of 40 powerful people recalibrating in real time. My father stood. "Rosalind, sit down, Lord Ashworth." The Duke's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. He hadn't raised it. He hadn't needed to. He was standing now, and in this room full of lords and ladies, the rank differential was absolute. My father was a baron. The man facing him could buy his house, his land, and his name, and have enough left for a modest country estate. "Your daughter has spoken the truth," the Duke said. "I would advise you not to make the next few minutes worse than they need to be." My father sat. The dinner did not recover. It didn't need to. By morning,
Every salon in London would have the real story, and the rumour my father had planted would wither against the far more compelling truth. That a young woman had been buried alive by her own family, and the Duke of Blackmore had dug her out. In the carriage afterward, I shook, not from fear, from the release of it. 3 years of silence finally broken, the truth spoken aloud in a room full of people who mattered, the walls of my prison dismantled in public. Edmund sat across from me. Lady Blackwood had taken a separate carriage. Whether by design or discretion, I wasn't sure. "You're trembling," he said. "I'm aware. Was it too much?" I laughed. It came out broken and strange and absolutely real. It was 3 years late. It was not nearly enough. He leaned forward. In the swaying lamplight of the carriage, his face was all planes and shadows, and his eyes held something that made the air between us feel thin. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said. "You know that." I was terrified. "Yes, and you did it anyway. That's what extraordinary means." The carriage hit a rut. I swayed. His hand caught my wrist, instinct, not intention, and the contact blazed through both of us. I saw it in the way his breath stopped. I felt it in the way mine did. He didn't let go. His thumb rested against my pulse point, and I knew he could feel how fast my heart was racing. And I didn't care.
"Edmund, don't." His voice was rough. "If you say my name like that in this carriage, I will do something I cannot undo." "What if I don't want it undone?" His grip tightened. Then, with a control that must have cost him everything, he released my wrist, sat back, and pressed his fist against his own knee as though pinning himself to the seat. "You deserve choices," he said. "Real ones. Not gratitude mistaken for something else. Not proximity confused with, 'Do not tell me what I feel.'" I said it quietly, but it landed like the strike at dinner. Precise, undeniable. "You are the only person in 3 years who has treated me as though my thoughts and choices matter. Do not now decide that this one doesn't count." He stared at me. The carriage swayed. London rattled past outside. "When this is over," he said, barely above a whisper, "when your father can't touch you, when your name is your own, when you've had time to breathe and choose and live, if you still look at me the way you're looking at me now, then what? Then I will say your name as many times as you'll let me, and I will never stop." My father's final move came a week later, and it nearly succeeded. He petitioned the Court of Chancery, claimed I was mentally unfit, the same fiction he'd maintained for 3 years, and demanded I be returned to his custody. He produced a physician's letter, backdated, describing a condition I did not have. He produced testimonies from servants he had intimidated. He built a cage out of paper and lies, and the legal machinery that allowed men like him to own their daughters like furniture. The hearing was set for a Thursday. Edmund's solicitors fought it, but the law was not designed to protect women from their fathers. It was designed to protect fathers from losing their property. I found the letters on Wednesday night. Not my mother's, Edmund's mother's. Lady Blackwood had kept them, bundled in a hatbox in the townhouse library. And when I'd asked to read them, all of them, not just the ones Edmund had mentioned, she'd handed them over without a word. My mother's correspondence with the Duchess was longer than Edmund knew. Years of letters, and buried in them, carefully, as though she knew someone might someday need the evidence, my mother had documented everything. My father's debts, his schemes, the specific transactions he had made with his daughter's futures, names, dates, amounts. She had written it all down and sent it to the one person she trusted outside the family. The chain was there. My mother wrote the letters. The Duchess received and kept them. The Duchess died, and her estate passed to Edmund. The letters remained in the family's London townhouse, where Lady Blackwood stored them after helping settle her sister-in-law's belongings. They had been in this house for 6 years, waiting. I brought them to Edmund at midnight. Improper. I didn't care. He was in the library. Of course he was. The man lived in libraries when he couldn't sleep. And when I entered with the bundle in my hands, he looked up from his desk with an expression that shifted from surprise to concern to something fierce and focused when he saw what I was carrying. "My mother's letters," I said. "All of them. She documented everything he did. Every debt, every arrangement, every lie." He stood, came around the desk, took the letters from my hands, and his fingers brushed mine, and neither of us pulled away. "This is enough," he said, reading. His eyes moved fast, and I watched the soldier in him surface. The strategist, the man who understood that wars are won with evidence as much as courage. "Rosalind, this is more than enough. This destroys his petition. This destroys his credibility. This is what my mother left me," I said. "She couldn't protect me while she was alive, but she made sure someone could, after." He looked up from the letters, and the armor, all of it, every plate, every rivet, fell away, and I saw the man underneath. Not the Duke, not the rescuer, not the strategist, but Edmund, whose mother had also died, who had also been left behind, who understood exactly what it meant to receive love from someone who was already gone. "She would be proud of you," he said. God, she would be so proud. I kissed him. Not elegantly, not with the careful choreography of a Regency romance. I put my hands on his face and I kissed him because I was done waiting for permission from a world that had never given me anything I hadn't taken for myself. He went still. 1 heartbeat, 2. And then his hands were in my hair and he was kissing me back with 3 months of restraint collapsing into a single, devastating point of contact. He tasted like whiskey and firelight and the breaking of every rule I had ever been taught. And when we finally pulled apart, both breathing ragged, his forehead pressed against mine, he said, "I was supposed to wait. You waited long enough. We both did." The hearing on Thursday lasted 40 minutes. Edmund's solicitors presented the letters. Every transaction, every lie, every debt leveraged against a daughter's future. My father's physician was discredited. The letter's date preceded an examination that never occurred. The servants' testimonies collapsed under questioning that revealed coordinated phrasing. But the moment that mattered, the one I will carry for the rest of my life, came when the judge asked me directly whether I wished to remain under the Duke of Blackmore's protection or return to my father's household. I stood. I looked at my father, smaller than I remembered, diminished by a courtroom that did not bend to his will the way his household did. "I am 21 years of age," I said. "I am of sound mind. I have been hidden, silenced and erased by a man who saw his children as currency. I do not wish to return. I wish to live." The petition was dismissed. My father left the courtroom without looking at me. Lady Ashworth followed, her face a mask of humiliation. Cecilia caught my eye from across the room and gave me the smallest nod. Not forgiveness, not alliance, but acknowledgement. I'll take it. Outside, in the pale spring sunlight, Edmund offered me his arm. I took it. Lady Blackwood walked ahead, already planning the next social engagement with the terrifying efficiency of a woman who understood that reputation was rebuilt one appearance at a time. "What happens now?" I asked. "Whatever you want," he said. That was always the point. He proposed 6 weeks later, in the garden of the London townhouse, on a Tuesday afternoon with no witnesses except the roses I had been coaxing into bloom along the south wall, because I could not stop making things grow, even in the city, even in borrowed soil. He did not kneel. He stood in front of me, holding a ring that had belonged to his mother, and said, "I came to Ashworth Park because of a letter. I stayed because of you. I am not offering you rescue. You rescued yourself the moment you said no at that dinner table 3 years ago. I am offering you partnership. A life where your name is spoken, your voice is heard, and no one, including me, gets to decide what you deserve." "Including you," I said, because even in this moment I could not stop pushing back. It was how I'd survived. It was how I'd live. Especially me. The ghost of a smile. The one I had learned to watch for. Rare, real, and entirely mine. "You are the most formidable person I have ever met, Rosalind Ashworth. And I would very much like to spend the rest of my life trying to keep up." I took the ring. I put it on myself, because I was done with having things done to me. "Yes," I said, "but I'm keeping the garden." He laughed. A real one. Full, startled, the sound of a man who had forgotten he could make that noise. And I thought, there it is. That is the sound of someone coming back to life. Both of us. Coming back to life. We married in September, at the estate in Derbyshire, with the autumn light turning the chapel windows to gold. Lady Blackwood sat in the front row and did not cry, though her handkerchief appeared twice. Cecilia came, alone, without our father, and I held her hand briefly before the ceremony, and felt the first fragile thread of something that might, with time, become sisterhood again. The roses from the London garden were arranged along the altar rail. I had cut them myself that morning, thorns and all. A year later, standing in the library of our home, I found the last of my mother's letters. Not addressed to the Duchess this time, addressed to me. It had been tucked inside the cover of a book of poetry she'd given to the Duchess years before their deaths, passed along with the rest of the Duchess's collection when Edmund inherited the estate. Lady Blackwood, while cataloguing the library, had discovered it and set it aside without opening it. The letter said, "My dearest Rosalind, if you are reading this, then the world was not kind enough to let me stay. But you are here. You survived. And that, my darling girl, was all I ever needed you to do. Everything else, the love, the freedom, the life you will build, that is yours. You owe it to no one, least of all me. I love you. I loved you first, and I loved you most, and nothing that comes after will change that." I read it in the library, in the chair by the fire, with Edmund's coat draped over my shoulders, because I'd been cold, and he'd noticed before I did. The roses outside the window were blooming again. They do that, when someone tends to them, when someone refuses to let them die, season after season, until the roots hold, and the soil is right, and the light finds them. They bloom,